Dear editors, what is the weirdest sleepover you've been to? My friend's mom was a raging alcoholic, but a very nice lady. We snuck some girls over when we were in high school. She woke up at 4 AM to get some vodka and found us all. She was really chill for about 25 minutes. Probably didn't know what time it was and was worried that we basically caught her drinking at 4 AM. She started making us pancakes and bacon and some iced tea, then asked if we wanted some cookies. When she put the cookies in the oven and saw the time, and also that it was pitch black outside, she flipped her fucking shit. Called all our parents to come over and assumed we were all having sex and told our parents that it was a wild night. My dad asked me what happened on the ride home and believed my story. You don't look excited enough to have just gotten laid. Apostrophe. So did you get any pancakes or bacon? Asking the important questions. I slept over a friend's house once on their couch and his grandfather passed away that night in his chair, like 5 feet away from me. I didn't wake up until 2 police officers walked into the room and his mom quickly grabbed me and walked me into another room. All I could do was hear and everyone sounded upset. I was confused for the longest time until someone finally came in and told me that I spent the night with a corpse in the room. Has it messed with you since? Or do you feel fine? No. The grandpa was dead, so he hasn't messed with me at all since then. My best friend, when I was 13, was a girl from church who had an N64. I stayed the night at her house once in the hopes of getting longer access to Gauntlet Warriors. Not only did her family breed rabbits, but she had a room-long built-in bookcase of Furbies. Every time I moved, those bastards blinked their eyes and started talking. I ducking hate Furbies. They creep me out. Toys are not supposed to learn. Do you have an Alexa now? When we were around 14, my friend Phil invited 2 of us over to sleep the night. We get ready for bed in our PJs, and he says he has a magic trick to show us. He calls his dog, a big Labrador, over and puts a towel over his head. He then gets on all 4s and crawls towards the dog. The dog instantly becomes aroused and starts vigorously shagging Phil's head. He's just giggling wildly as the dog plows the towel on his head. Me and my other friend just stare at each other wondering what the duck is happening. Eventually the dog comes all over Phil's towel head. Phil then grabs the towel and starts trying to wipe it on us for a joke. I went into instant rage mode at the thought of Phil's dog come touching me, so I punched him square in the face. He burst into tears and shouted for his mum. When she ran into the room to see what was happening, she sees 3 teenage boys, a strangely wet towel and a very satisfied Labrador. Phil then shouts, "Mum." They swore at me and points to me and my friend. His mum then goes ducking nuclear, saying she won't accept swearing in her house, and proceeds to kick us out. I'll never forget being stood in the dark on the pavement at 10 PM in my PJs, looking back at the house where I just saw a dude go full buckache with his pet dog, wondering how in the duck I'm going to get home, and how I'm going to explain this to my parents. What the actual duck? Red Rocket. When I was in grade 8, I went over to my friend George's house for a sleepover. We had a fun time playing video games and hanging out before going to bed. In the middle of the night I woke up to see George going out of the bedroom and walking down the hall. Figuring he had to pee, I dozed back to sleep. A while later I was jarred away by this crazy bumping sound, and suddenly George appeared in the doorway holding a very heavy chair from the living room by a single leg. He looks at me and says, "Here, this is for you," and tossed the chair into the middle of the room before turning and walking out. I was freaked out, but his mother heard the commotion and came in and calmly explained to me that George was a sleepwalker. I stayed over many more times, with George reliably getting up and doing weird things on many occasions. Can I learn more about George? Sounds like a legend. Yeah, you /flopper sausage. There's no way that's the weirdest story of George. My cousin had a friend who always caked on the Macup. I never seen the girl without Macup. We were all getting sleepy and the girl with the Macup was still wide awake. Apparently she waited until we were all asleep and then washed her face. She got up super early and I had to use the washroom and she was reapplying her Macup again. Looking back, I feel so bad for her. She must have had some self-esteem issues. I had a coworker who did that. The issue is that we are medics. And when you are on call you have to get ready fast. She refused to see a patient if she didn't fix her macube. At first I felt bad for her. But after some nights I just wanted to kill her. Lost so many hours of rest because of her. That's when you go to the supervisor and complain. She's gotta look good for people dying. We walked in his house and his father was chasing the younger brother around with a belt like a fun game. Oh, and the kid was completely nude. I feel like this was oddly common in the 90s. Where the hell were you in the 90s where this was normal lol? Stayed the night at a friend's house when I was like 13 or 14. I fell asleep pretty early by our standards, before midnight, and awoke at 4 AM with my nostrils on fire, like burning. Searing pain. Turns out, he had gotten high and watched old cartoons. In one of them, Pepper made someone sneeze, and so he tried to sneeze me awake by stuffing pepper up my nose. My best friend did that to me. She cut open a tea bag, emptied it and put pepper in, and then tied it back up. It worked. I was kinda upset, but it was funny. Why do you put tea bags up your nose? When I was 11, I had a really hard time sleeping at other people's houses. I guess it was sleepover anxiety. My buddy had a nice big house on the other side of town. I even thought it was gonna be great cause his house is so nice and his family was great. Had a great night. My buddy was lethargic, but we had hockey that day and I just figured he was relaxed and tired or something. 20 minutes after bedtime. Hez already sawing logs. WTH, we were gonna stay up and watch his brother play Re 2. So I shook him up. He sits up, groans an inhuman groan, and puked all over himself. He was mumbling and shaking. Scared the living shit out of me. I seriously thought he turned into a zombie. An hour later I'm in my dad's car heading home. My friend was rushed to the hospital. He had meningitis. He almost died. His neck was stiff from hockey, he thought. He was warm cause he sat by a fireplace while we watched a movie, he thought. Visited him at the hospital a couple days later with a gift bag. We stayed friends for a few years after. I eventually got over the sleepover anxiety. I can safely say I've been having sleepovers with my wife at our home for a few years now. You almost certainly saved his life. Sleeping over my friend's house, not understanding that he lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and had to sleep in between his parents on a king size, and then my friend peed the bed. When I was in 7th grade I had a friend stay over and she slept in my bed. We had drank Mountain Dew all night and around 6 in the morning I woke up to a puddle of piss. She wet my bed. I was so mortified and repulsed that I rolled over and just pretended to be asleep. She woke up and used a shirt to mop up the piss. I never said a word, but as soon as she left all my bedding went straight in the washer. You're a good person. Me and my older brother were sleeping over at a family friend's house with his kid who was also a good friend of ours. And when we woke up they sent their kid to school and let us sit around in the house playing his PS2. Well, may I bet that kid was mad as hell. Not me but my sister. She was 16 and she went over to her best friend's sweet 16 birthday party where they were supposed to stay overnight. Now then, this gal's dad was a quite unhinged individual and had some peculiar methods for parenting. The day the party was planned he found out that his daughter's grades dropped and she was about to fail a class or something like that. I don't remember, but he was pissed. But instead of doing what any normal parent would, he came up with a plan of ruining his daughter's social life completely by embarrassing her in front of all her friends, or at least that's the official version. Anyway, the party went on uninterrupted until around 9 PM when my sister, crying and shaken, called my dad to pick her up. Apparently they were all sitting around chilling when her dad knocked on the door saying he's got one last surprise for the day girl, and then barged in with his dick out exposing himself to them, then chased them outside, ordered day girl to go back to her room and shut the door behind the guests. My dad was the first to arrive, called the cops and went straight to the house, rang the bell and clocked the guy straight in the jaw. He got a sentence. Then my sister's friend moved away with her mom after the divorce and they lost contact. Her dad lived there for like a year, but had to move as well, because like in every little town no one really wanted him there anymore. I wonder what happened to that poor girl. Damn. That's stuck up. Good on your dad for popping that sig ducker. One time I went over to my new friend's house to have a sleepover and was immediately greeted with a room full of dolls. As soon as my mom dropped me off at her house, she took me into this room that had the lights off and was filled with these porcelain dolls and creepy puppets. There was so many that they filled up a whole sofa, the floor next to it, and even sat on shelves on the walls. What was creepy about it was that she immediately started to introduce me to them by their names. She picks up this really old doll that was pale with red glass eyes and tells me that it was haunted. She told me that another friend that had stayed over had a staring contest with it and lost. When it was time to go to bed, she showed me another doll and told me that this one liked to run around her room at night, and if I heard little footsteps, that I should just ignore them. She even showed me another one that she said would bite you if it didn't like you. I didn't sleep at all that night and I never went over to her house again. She told me that another friend that had stayed over had a staring contest with it and lost. I mean, technically, that's the only acceptable outcome. If the doll blinks first, that's much worse. Yes, losing that contest would concern me more. I went to a sleepover when I was like 6 and the girl whose house it was at had a theater. It wasn't her birthday or anything like that. Her mom just thought it would be fun. Her mom sounds awesome. Eating pasta at 3 AM while 2 of my friends loudly ducked on the loft just above us. Can I consider it as food fetish? Only if you get aroused by this memory specifically while eating pasta. We had a competition to see how long we could keep an avocado mask on. I won, but also realized I was allergic to avocados. Her mom tried to put essential oils on my face to cure my allergy. Made it worse, and I had to have my mom pick me up. Shit, a kid got hurt under my supervision. Better throw everything I got in the kitchen at it before someone notices. Standard Karen when the only tool in her belt is essential oils. 8th or 9th grade. I was spending the night at a buddy's house. We get up the next morning and his mom is passed the duck out on the kitchen floor. Hardcore alcoholic. My friend wakes her up to get her to bed when she says I puked in the car. You guys need to go clean it up. I said you're on your own, Matt, and noped on home. Poor Matt. 10 years old. Slept over at my buddy's place for his birthday. His dad let us rent Rambo, First Blood and Rambo, First Blood Part 2. All 3 of us watched them. Eventually we fell asleep on the recliners. I was nodding off when I noticed his dad staring at me. Just staring. I pretended to sleep and he just continued to stare the whole night. What the actual duck? Sounds like the dad slept with eyes open. The first and only sleepover I ever went to, it consisted of me, male, and my 3 female friends. And they knew I was straight. So I was surprised I was invited. At some point during the night, it was mentioned that I had been single and lonely for a long time. By the time the sun came up the next morning, I had played my first game of Foursquare. I had watched Mean Girls and Clueless for the first time. I got a back rub from each of my friends. I ended up in the center of a cuddle pile. Edited, spacing. Mean Girls is a great movie. Best part of that night. You can't just ask someone why they're white. Not going into details. I slept with 5 girls in a bed, and one of them was my crush when I was 13 to 14. Really happy moment, but still really weird for someone like me. Wait, are you male or female? Only asking because what parents would let a male sleep with like 5 girls? My mom was usually super strict about boys, but she'd always let my sister's one friend sleep over. Even though I dated him briefly in high school, he'd had sex with girls in the past, but everyone just assumed he was gay, so she didn't even consider that anything would happen. I guess there's also the fact that he was a few years younger than my sister and her friends. But I would sometimes sleep in the same room as all of them, and sometimes it was even when our parents were out of town. So I always thought that was kind of weird. For the record, he's actually bisexual. Nothing ever did happen at any of these sleepovers, but it was still odd. Even though my current partner and I were just friends in high school, my mom would never let him sleep over, I guess, because he was traditionally masculine, looked like 3 years older than he was. Whereas this other guy was about as sexually threatening as a teddy bear in the eyes of most parents. Also, he cleaned our house every time he came over, so my mom loved him. Went to a kinky after party. Sexy games and group sex all over the place. Turned out my sister was there. We played cards and sobered up. Shit man. Where was it? Alabama? Why did the Alabama man have sex with his clock? Someone told him time is relative. One time when I was in like 3rd grade, I got invited to a sleepover at a popular girl's house. I was really nervous, and I ended up falling asleep right after we got our pajamas on. I woke up to one of them popping a snot bubble on my face. I don't remember what happened after that. My shame consumed me. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.